Good evening, everyone. The Ranter is back to go into yet another rambling diatribe of the news of the day. And, geez, what's the news of the day? We're continuing fallout of the continuing drama. There's just the continuing of the Jeffrey Epstein file, or not file, or maybe there's a file, but maybe there's not a file. Could there be a file? Probably not there's a file, but maybe there's a file. But the file's a hoax, but it doesn't exist. But it does exist, because it was written by Obama, and Comey, and Hillary Clinton, and the Easter Bunny. Or it doesn't exist. So, little emphasis on this. I was going to be doing this the last couple of days, but things got kind of swamped. And usually, whenever I do these, I do take some time to let things kind of simmer. Because, you hear one news clip, and you want to just kind of run up to the camera and just, vent out to the void upon your opinion on it. But sometimes, you do that, within the last, 30 seconds to an hour of first hearing it, and then 2 hours later, it's like, that got contradicted. So I wanted to give it time to, germinate and see if things fall out one way or the other. So, between the last time I did this, which was a couple days ago, to now, we've had a bit of an interesting response from our good old dear leader, President Donald Trump, in this whole Epstein thing. So I'm going to read to you a couple of articles, one concerning him and his Truth Social post, that he expressed himself not only about the Jeffrey Epstein case, but those people who are clamoring to see the files reviewed and exposed for all to see, which is actually many of his supporters. So, let us go into this. I'm going to first start this off from the ABC News article. Trump blasts stupid and foolish Republicans amid calls to reveal more Epstein files. President Donald Trump continued Wednesday to dismiss calls within his own party for more transparency into the Jeffrey Epstein investigation and made claims, without evidence, that the controversy was designed to undermine him. In a lengthy social media post, which includes references to the president's previous claims about the 2017 Russian election interference probe, Trump blamed Democrats for creating what he called a scam and a hoax. Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, and my past supporters have bought into this bullshit hook, line, and sinker, he wrote. Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi have come under fire from conservatives on the Hill and across the country for declining to release the Epstein probe files in their entirety. The Justice Department and the FBI last week stated that they found no evidence that the deceased financier kept the client list of associations whom he blackmailed or conspired with to victimize dozens of women. In his post, Trump disavowed those who focused on the Epstein story rather than his accomplishments. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. They don't even think about talking about our incredible and unprecedented successes because I don't want their support anymore. Me. Trump later doubled down on the messaging in the Oval Office, where he was holding a bilateral meeting with Bahrain Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa. ABC News chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce pressed Trump on why he was now labeling the issue a hoax. Has your Attorney General told you this was a hoax? What evidence have you seen of that? Bruce asked the president. The Attorney General, no. I know it's a hoax, Trump insists without providing any evidence, as he tends to do. He then continued to argue without evidence that that this was perpetrated by Democrats, blasting Republicans who are now demanding transparency. It was a hoax. It's all been a hoax. It was perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work. The Democrats are good for nothing other than these hoaxes, Trump told ABC's Bruce. Many Republicans on the Capitol Hill, however, said on Wednesday they still have lingering questions on our pushing for transparency. I obviously don't speak for the White House, but what I can tell you is that I'm also hearing him ask for transparency on the topic, something that we've been very, very much so championing, said Representative Ann Paulina Luna, a Florida Republican. Representative Eric Bullison, a Missouri Republican, said he wants more from Trump. Quote, I think at the end of the day, this is a question of, does this government belong to the people, or does people belong, or do the people belong to this government, the president? He told ABC News. When Trump was asked if he's effectively disowning this group of his supporters, he said, "Yeah, I've lost a bit of faith in certain people because they got duped by Democrats." Trump then again came to Bondi's defense despite growing pressures on her to clarify her past comments, on instance even calling for her resignation. "I really think she's done it very good," Trump said. "She says, I gave you all the credible information. If she finds more credible information, she'll give that too. What more can she do than that? I mean, honestly, what more can she do?" He then tried to shift the focus, saying Epstein is dead, he's gone, and argued there are more important things to focus on. As he wrapped up the press gaggle in the Oval Office, the reporters were directed to leave the room. ABC's Bruce asked the president directly, "Is your name in the files? Is that why we aren't being fully released?" Trump pointed to the doors and only said thank you. My mouth's watering, excuse me. Well, that was interesting. Yeah, when you see the Truth Social post of him, he does, as he is wont to do, he links everything that could be possibly negative, not only calling it a hoax, he always brings up Russia, 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 because we need to have you associate anything that goes on with Russiagate so that it can discredit whatever it is. So that's a lovely little ploy that is extremely recognizable. Here's the problem. Like Russiagate, and one of the reasons why Russiagate was so convincing for people, including myself, is that he can't help but to add with his actions or words to the theories. I'm germinating my mind here. It's interesting. His emotion involved in this. It's just the snapping that he's doing. I mean, when he got asked for a question at another press conference during the Texas flood, he says, "Why are people talking about Jeffrey Epstein? He's dead. He's a creep. Why?" And I noticed this in the first administration, that Trump has this way about him that he doesn't want people to remember the past. Unless, of course, it's a past that benefits him. Or he takes credit for some things in the past that he had nothing to do with, but he'll say he did it. But he doesn't want people to bring up stuff that he said or did, or is accused of, that he can't make any manipulated, spin on it for his benefit. And why are you even talking about this? Look at all the great accomplishments that we did. It's, and then, like I also say, is like whenever something hits critical mass, then he'll try to do something else to draw the attention away to, take the heat off of this. So he's going to do this. So things like he's going to take over D.C., or he's going to take over New York if the mayoral nominee actually wins. He's going to, if Putin doesn't do any peace, he's gonna bomb Moscow, which is actually funny because Russia then called him on it, and pretty much says, "You're just saying that because you don't want people to not talk about Jeffrey Epstein." Right, direct with that. Which, that is not a Trump, or that is not a Trump exclusive thing. Politicians did that before in both sides of the aisle. Bill Clinton, when the Monica Lewinsky issue was picking up steam, he wanted to change the subject, so we bombed Albania, or got us into Kosovo, and that was the whole concept of wag the dog started to become more popular in our cultural lexicon. If we wanted to get rid of people's attention to a story, let's make another story to make them pay attention to that. And you see the Trump loyalists that come out and try to help him with that. One of the things when I think the group Turning Point, which is Charlie Kirk's group, had their gathering of conservatives. He and the other conservative pundits and talking heads and gerbils got up on stage, and a lot of them was talking about Jeffrey Epstein. Laura Ingraham wanted people to raise their hand or clap if they were satisfied in of the findings of the Jeffrey Epstein case, and they booed. And she visibly didn't like that. It's just, I didn't tell you to boo, you're not listening to me. And then, clap if you're not satisfied, and everybody clapped. When Charlie Kirk went on stage with Steve Bannon and the others, it's just this, raise your hand if you think just Jeffrey Epstein thing is very important, and they all raised their hand. So Charlie Kirk tried to ride this wave to also ask the questions as to why this stuff isn't getting released, until he got a phone call. And then now he goes, I'm tired of talking about Charlie Kirk. I'm going to trust our government, trust this administration to do what they need to do, and I'm just going to move on. The same thing said by Ben Shapiro when asked, what are your sources on you thinking that there's nothing there in the Epstein files? And what is your source? My sources. And he has this really weird voice, especially he has this debater's cadence where it's like he's like the micro machine guy. He wants to get all his points across, talk over anybody else who's speaking. So he says everything else really, really quickly. So his sources was the President of the United States, the Attorney General, the Vice President, the Easter Bunny, Moses, and Jesus. And Moses and Jesus wasn't around to comment. But pretty much his sources as to what's in the Epstein files or what's not in the Epstein files, if the Epstein files existed or not, is the actual presidential administration of Donald Trump. So, yeah. But recently on Newsmax, ancient old Bill O'Reilly, who made more of a name of himself during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, much rose Fox News up, and the O'Reilly Factor was a big and major show. I used to watch it when I was younger. I mean, didn't agree with him, but like my mother would say, is that you don't have to agree with them to watch them. But if you want to understand what the other side of your opinion is talking about, if you want to understand it, you gotta watch it. And sometimes you really have to get the gag reflex when you watch this stuff. But sometimes her point was well taken, because you do want to learn the thought process of not only what they are putting out in their version of news and facts and so forth, because opinion shows, be it Fox News or MSN or CNN, like I've said before, will take a bit of news, will take a bit of facts, and then they'll have their opinion experts do a spin for their political leanings. So it could be the same bit of news. Both sides are promoting the same bit of news, but then their analysts will craft it to the left or to the right. Well, Bill O'Reilly went on this Newsmax show, and he pretty much blasted the Biden administration and for the handling of the Epstein arrest and firing, Epstein's arrest, convictions, and his potential death. And you see the guy that he's interviewing with him is actually Googling while Bill O'Reilly says, no, sir, you're wrong. I'm not wrong. You're wrong, because he was convicted in 2019. He was put in prison in 2019, and he died in 2019. He was arrested under Merrick Garland. No, Mr. O'Reilly. It was 2019. Donald Trump was in office. Merrick Garland was not the Attorney General, and Bill O'Reilly froze in the camera's face for like a couple long seconds. Yes. Okay. So there is a media narrative on that side of the spectrum that is trying to push this really weird alternative fact land of this being a creature of democratic creation. That the Epstein file, the Epstein list, was written by, this is Trump now, written by Obama, Hillary Clinton, and James Comey. When? And why? Epstein was convicted on his time. Epstein died. He had committed suicide or something else during the time of Trump 1.0. At the time of Trump being in president, he seems to always want to make sure that those departments that he has never really had a permanent head. Is always active, because he would want to be able to fire people at a moment's notice and not have to go through the rigmarole paperwork. And one of the people that he didn't want to have a permanency was the head of the prison system. And the particular prison that Jeffrey Epstein was put in had a little bit of issues involved with it. And now that we find out that there is videotape that was highly suggested to be modified when they produced it, with missing gap of a minute, but you see the edited clips of this time frame disappear on Trump's watch. It does make you wonder, and as I said, that similar to Russiagate, Trump can't help but leave breadcrumbs, whether they lead somewhere or not. It does fan the flames of the opinion and the theory and the theorizing of whether he's involved or not. One of the other odd occurrences was also happening during the first Trump administration, during the time of Epstein's conviction. Epstein not going to trial at all. Alexander Acosta, who was the U.S. attorney in Florida at the time, gave Epstein a sweetheart deal, and he then became a member of the Trump administration at the time as the Secretary of Labor, till he resigned when people unearthed this. I'm going to read you this. This is an old article. This goes back to September 16th, 2019. This is from PBS News. Epstein accusers denied compensation in victims' rights case. A group of women who say they were sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein suffered a setback Monday in their decade-long legal fight over a plea deal that allowed the financier to avoid a lengthy prison term. A federal judge in West Palm Beach, Florida, ruled that the women were not entitled to compensation from the U.S. Justice Department, even though prosecutors violated their rights by failing to consult them about the 2008 deal to end a federal probe that could have landed Epstein in prison for life. Quote, in the end, they are not receiving much, and if any of the relief they sought, quote unquote, U.S. District Judge Kenneth Mara wrote. One of the women's attorneys, Paul Cassell, said they were considering an appeal. Quote, we are disappointed that no remedy will be awarded for the proven violations of the victims. The victims' rights that the government caused in this case, he said. Several of Epstein's victims sued the Justice Department in 2008 over their handling of the plea negotiations in which his victims were purposely kept in the dark by state and federal prosecutors in South Florida. They kept the legal case alive for years, even after Epstein finished serving his 13-month jail term, paid financial settlements to victims, and registered as a sex offender, arguing that prosecutors had violated the Federal Crimes Victims' Rights Act. The drawn-out litigation ultimately fueled a Miami Herald investigation into the plea negotiations, which in turn led to a new wave of public outrages over the perceived favoritism treatment for Epstein, who once counted Presidents Donald Trump and Bill Clinton as friends. Federal prosecutors in New York revived the case, arguing they weren't bound by the original deal and charged Epstein with sex trafficking. Former Miami U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, who oversaw the plea deal, stepped down as U.S. Labor Secretary amid the renewed scrutiny. And Marr ruled in February that prosecutors had violated the rights of dozens of Epstein accusers by secretly reaching a non-prosecution agreement that allowed Epstein to plead guilty to state charges. Despite those findings, Marr said in his decision Monday, the Crimes Victims' Rights Act did not authorize an award of restitution to the women. He also said that they weren't entitled to recover attorney's fees from the government or have the original plea bargain thrown out or get other things they asked for, including records related to the investigation and a personal meeting with Acosta. But he said they could take solace in the national attention their lawsuits brought to the importance of victims in the criminal justice system. Oh gosh darn, what a nice little concession prize it is. It's like going on Wheel of Fortune and decide that your secondary prize was a bus trip to Romania. No disrespect for those who are Romanian, but if we're going to go to Tahiti and bus trip. It has also resulted in the United States Department of Justice acknowledging its shortcomings in dealing with crime victims and its promise to begin to better train its prosecutors regarding the rights of victims under the CVRA in the future, Marr wrote in a 15-page ruling. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami did not immediately return the message seeking comment. Epstein killed himself in August in a federal jail in New York where he was awaiting trial. U.S. Attorney General William Barr has vowed to bring justice to anyone who helped Epstein recruit underage women for sex acts. Yeah, that worked out very well. Ask Madam Maxwell about that, as she's the only person who was convicted and actually put into prison for that, who was associated with Jeffrey Epstein. So 2008, this piece of cheese, U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, did a sweetheart plea deal so Epstein would plead guilty and never have to go to trial. Yeah. In which, when Trump became president the first time around, he became the Secretary of Labor. Interesting coincidence. Coinky-dinky. And when things started to get heat up about this in 2019, he had to resign. To which Trump himself said, it's a shame. It's a shame he had to resign. It's not fair. It's not fair to Mr. Acosta. It is interesting the direct and indirect connections some people have with Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump at the top of the totem pole here, but also Howard Lutnick, who was in the Trump administration, who was a neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein. Alan Dershowitz, former lawyer to Donald Trump, still a close loyalist, who initially did say that there was a Epstein file list, that he had seen it, but he was under legal confidentiality to divulge any of the information about it. Then later, pretty much the same time as Charlie Kirk and the current DOJ said that there was nothing there. There was no list. Now, there could be some semantics involved in this, because like I said in the last video, I don't think there was an actual list of names, and side by side with those names is the list of lewd sexual acts that they did while raping little girls in the preteen and early teen years. But there's a client list. Now, do we know if this is a list of people that were being bribed to keep the secret and keep him happy in his deviant debauchery? Who knows? But I can probably have some certainty and confidence that there was indeed a list that MAGA influencers was pushing during the election, because one of the things that were trying to get Trump elected was that he was going to once again drain the swamp and the corruption that would be protecting people like Epstein, and who they gosh darn hoped that people like Bill Clinton would be on this list, or other Democrats for that matter, would be on this list. But then, poof, it was gone. The list that was on Pam Bondi's desk, confidently she says, is no list at all. There's nothing credible on that. After Trump did a few temper tantrums about why people paying attention to the Epstein case, why? He then started to try to turn the corner and say that she should be able to release all the stuff that is relevant or credible. Which, in my cynical mind goes, she should release anything that does not have Trump or Trump's friends' names on it. There was an interesting kind of bombshell that Senator Dick Durbin released, talking about how there was a leak in the Justice Department suggesting that in lieu of Pam Bondi releasing something to appease the growing hunger for people to see this list, to see these other co-conspirators in the systematic and disgusting rape of children, that Pam Bondi's Justice Department was assigning over 1,000 FBI agents to comb over 100,000 documents and flag any of the documents that has Trump's name in it. If true, holy fuck. I guess his name is not credible information for us to have. President Pedo. And Biden's a pedophile because he sniffs people's hair. Trying to keep all this in mind, because I do try to be as impromptu as I can in my venting into the void for my sweet snowflakes, but sometimes I tend to forget things. But like I said, there is such a weird little connecting points that Trump has and Trump associates have with Epstein. And like I said last time, it's not really about Democrats and Republicans. This is about power. This is being able to do anything you want because you are rich and powerful and famous. To be handed a young teen girl like she was a party favor. And you doing whatever you want to this young girl, regardless of how hard she cries and says no. Over to the fact that you, as a human being, as a mature adult, who probably proclaims himself to be a Christian, should be utterly disgusted with even the concept of it. That you feel revulsion even thinking about it. But then you partake in that forbidden fruit. You know, back in the day, forbidden fruit was, enjoying the life of homosexuality. Well, since that's no longer, at least in the mainstream parlance, it's no longer something so abhorrent that people turn away even from the biblical scriptures that proclaim it as thus. Well, what is the next? If that's no longer shocking, then what is there? Oh, children. There you go. It is the power to do whatever you want because they could, as I said in the quotations of the 8mm movie the last time around, because they can. They abuse, rape young girls on Epstein's island, on his property, on Donald Trump's property, because they could. Because no one can stop them. No one gets even close to the concept of stopping them. Of all the criticism of the Trump administration involving Jeffrey Epstein, very few really have the balls to actually go to the top of the totem pole. Pam Bondi is being set up as a fall guy, or a fall lady, in this point of view. But isn't she working at the pleasure of Donald Trump? It was something that I wanted to bring up last time, but as I said, sometimes I just forget what I was going to say. What would be worse? That Donald Trump is completely ahead of his faculties, that the buck stops with him, that in every action, not only in the Jeffrey Epstein case, but in the arms to Ukraine, or the conflict with Gaza, in Israel, Russia, and Ukraine, tariffs, etc., that all of that is on his direction. That he, as the President of the United States, with that capability and power and authority to direct his cabinet to do his will, and all of this goes back to him originally. Therefore, therefore, the things like there being an Epstein list, there's no longer an Epstein list, that came from him. The same thing goes if, there was an Epstein list, but it was written by the Democrats, it came from him. And this gets filtered down. That's one. That's the one side of this either or. The other side of that either or is, what if Donald Trump, who a lot of people repeatedly, on, as you see, question his cognitive decline. The examples of his cognitive decline pretty much the same way as they question and wonder about Joe Biden. What if he is just a figurehead? And all the hard work surrounding any of these issues, including Jeffrey Epstein, is being done by the cabinet at his behest, but not at his order. There was a number of instances where he is signing out executive orders where it appears that he doesn't even know what these executive orders are, that someone has to explain it to him before he signs it. That when there was a pause in delivering weapons to Ukraine, he kind of looked at Pete Hegseth like as if he didn't know about this, and he just asked Pete Hegseth if that was the case or not. That when he was questioned by the press, is that first he says he didn't know about it, and then he said, "Of course I would know about it. There's no way I would not know about it." Which is worse? Because one bears, if the former is worse, then all this stuff, including the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, the buck stops with him. He is directing it all. Whatever motivation, whatever theory you want to say of his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein or not, the actions that are happening now is at his direct authority, that he directed them to do it, including firing Maureen Comey, not only James Comey's daughter, but a veteran prosecutor who was prosecuting Sean Diddy Combs and prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell. Or was it Jeffrey Epstein involved? No, it was Epstein, pardon me. Firing Epstein. Firing the prosecutor that was handling the Epstein case. That's certainly not a breadcrumb, is it? That's not something that we should be wondering about. No, of course not. No, of course not. I'm sure it has nothing to do with it. No, she just fired him because her last name is Comey. That's the legit reason why she would be fired. We don't like to think that we fall into the trap of conspiracy theory, even when we kind of do. We kind of like label it as, us theorizing or us spitballing, and we fall into the non-evidentiary opinion of like, well, it kind of sounds like it, and you run with that instead of it running with facts. What Joe Rogan would say is that we're just talking here. We're not saying one thing or another. We're just talking. We're just talking. Just talking. Not advocating. We're just talking. But the more you talk about it, the more it sounds like you're advocating. Or you're giving your opinion, and your opinion with a strong audience means more than just giving an opinion. Which is, again, you can go back to Russiagate about that. How much mileage you can get from someone acting a certain way, or innocuous evidence that isn't strong enough evidence, but nonetheless draws enough attention to inspire the what ifs. Donald Trump is a friend of Jeffrey Epstein's. longtime friend of Epstein's. They unearthed a letter he sent for Jeffrey Epstein as part of his 50th birthday celebration. Epstein had this scrapbook that had all these people sending him letters and little pictures and so forth, and saying happy birthday, what a great guy he is. And Trump's was involved. Trump's was in there. Now, his letter was a little bit suggestive, and a little doodle in there, a little girly doodle. And he sent to a sex offending, child raping pedophile in the early 2000s. Trump tried to suppress this knowledge from coming out. Was going to threaten to sue the Wall Street Journal on their reporting, and Wall Street Journal just gave him that and ran with it. That adds to the credibility of this conspiracy theory. You go over the list of him being friends with Jeffrey Epstein. You go over the 2 times he nearly went to court, Donald Trump, in the 90s for an event in the 90s. So, an event in the 90s where he was accused of raping a 13-year-old girl. She dropped the case. She re-upped the case, dropped it again because she feared for her family's safety. But her horrific story became public. But at the time, it didn't really come up, especially during the 2016 election, where there was only an inkling of it, but the media never covered it, not even covered it to debunk it. But a horrific enough story upon how he forced his way on this little girl, took her virginity, bragged about it to Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein got pissed off about it, that he got to her before that, and then brutalized her, raping her even more, and far worse, in various other acts that Donald Trump didn't think of at the time. Epstein gets a sweetheart plea deal to avoid trial from Alexander Ocasio, who, when Trump becomes president, he became his Secretary of Labor. Howard Lutnick, who is now currently in the Trump administration, was laughing alongside Trump when Trump was debunking that there was any Epstein case, and he doesn't understand the attention towards it, and Lutnick is laughing right next to him. He was his neighbor. Alan Dershowitz, who said at first that he knew and saw the Epstein list of client names, now claims that no list exists, or that's not the way the list is supposed to be interpreted, who also admitted to getting one of these Epstein massages by these little girls, but he was a good boy because he kept his underwear on. They fire the prosecutor, Maureen Comey, deny the existence of an Epstein list, directs people like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro to quote the family line, the party line here, that there is no Epstein list, calls Republicans weaklings for falling to this Democratic hoax and bullshit. Doesn't want us to talk about it. Does things to try to draw attention away, like threatening to bomb Moscow. bringing up the tariffs again because it's tariff season again, and that lasts about 3 days. There's smoke here. The question is there fire? Whether you believe Russiagate or not, there was enough breadcrumbs that draws the opinion of there being smoke, that there could have been a fire of connection and collusion and so forth between Russia and Donald Trump. But it couldn't be proven. And during the majority of that time period was under Trump and his DOJ. We didn't even get any investigations in Trump at all until the midterms when the Democrats took over. And any attempts of doing it before then was always kind of, window framing. Just enough for visuals and with the Republicans in control to deny any of this stuff and not do anything. Similar to now, isn't it? The Republicans who clamored against Democrats or against Biden and using the Epstein case, using the information being garnered during the Biden administration, blaming them for the lack of transparency, blaming them for why is it not coming out all at once and why is it getting piecemealed out, this and that. These Republicans, when under Trump this week, when they were asked by their congressional colleagues to vote on a matter to compel the release of the Epstein file list in their Rules Committee, the Republicans voted it down, with them saying, we trust the Trump administration to handle it at their own time. You know what's getting lost in the noise in all this? And it only gets mentioned for the emotional, the emotional rigmarole about this, about the factual things of what we're talking about here. This is about young girls being systematically raped repeatedly. I don't care who does it. Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, any celebrity. If they did it, we should fucking know about it, and they should fucking be shamed about it if we can't prosecute them because of statutory limitations. They should be pariahs in our community. But the thing is that once again, we are being denied the full facts here. We're being glad-handed. It says, oh, there's nothing here, move on. Nothing here, move on. Nothing here, moving on about children being raped. I used to comment to people who talk about abortion and the emotional manipulation that some people use in order to describe abortions to try to make it sound horrific, which it is. But to make it sound horrific for the emotional manipulation to garner their points against it, as opposed to being for choice or not for choice. These people who spent the last couple of years talking about groomers, railing against drag story time, promoting lives from TikTok with the most horrific of the very most minor of people in the LGBTQ community, doing horrible shit or doing not very appropriate shit in, around, or in the vicinity of children, are all mum to the actual child rape done by Jeffrey Epstein and for those buddies of his who got to enjoy his party favors. as we found out in Maxwell's trial, some were being done on Trump property. Trump met them, at least one. And I'm not talking about the one that allegedly he raped. So you want to hear emotional manipulation? Something that should, bring about the perception as to what we are fucking talking about here. Do you have a deep, dark imagination? Can you imagine this? I have a bit of imagination. I have had a bit of a history. Certainly nothing to do with children. Certainly nothing terrible. But I've been around environments of consensual adults doing things that people go, oh, that's terrible. That's horrible. That's demeaning. That's perverted. It's the dark side of the street. But at least no one gets hurt. No one gets raped. No child gets abused. But in that case, in my mind, the horrific things that I can imagine that was actually being done to these girls. Can you imagine it? Do I have to spell it out for you? For this emotional manipulation? To get over the fact that this guy, that some people voted against their own personal interests, just to own the fucking libs. That should be horrific at the idea that that warous blubber of him, even in the mid-90s, was on top of a little girl who was screaming no. Can you imagine that? That would be no different of horrific if it was Bill Clinton on top of a little girl who was screaming no. So this is not political fucking bias. I worry about this country, losing its decency, but it's gone. What we do to human beings in this country, under this Trump administration, who does that shit publicly and proudly, as opposed to Democratic administrations who also do it, but do it under the table shamefully. People who make this type of compromise, and I'm a champion of compromise, is an American genius, is compromise, political compromise. Sometimes compromise goes too far for the sake of your fucking political tribe. How many people, if enough leaks happen where an actual serious, honest-to-God investigation does happen, and Trump's name is all over this shit, and the lady, who is now a lady as opposed to when she was a little girl, has enough bravery and enough protection around her that she can actually tell her story publicly, and to go to court about it, even though statute of limitations is run out, at least comes publicly out with this, and then have evidentiary assistance of this, you find out that Trump partook in Jeffrey Epstein's party favors, that he's involved in the cover-up, that he protected, that he gave benefit to the U.S. attorney who gave him a sweetheart deal, who then directed his attorney general now in this presidential term to say that there was nothing there in the Epstein case, that if true of the bombshell that she's having 1,000 FBI agents comb through documents to make sure they can flag anything that resembles the name Trump in it, If all this proves to be true and you are still voting, still supporting Donald Trump, then you would allow her to fuck and rape a little girl in order to own the libs. That is on you. You prove that Bill Clinton did that shit, Democrats would be torches and pitchforks, and we would shame him. See, there's a little dynamic difference between the parties here, which is evident, and it doesn't have to be evident. Doesn't necessarily have to be just about Trump. Well, Al Franken got in trouble when he got accused of misconduct with a woman, with a little picture of him groping. The Democrats didn't bury it. The Democrats didn't shuffle him away. The Democrats don't talk about it. They served him up on the altar of morality. And they were along the charge of casting him out for the mere appearance. They gave him the due process to tell his side of the story, but they still rejected him and they still moved him out. But like anything else in the Trump administration, or any of the servile, gerbil, lemming supporters and fans who will dismiss and excuse anything that Trump does or is accused of doing, there is no due process needed. Be it immigration, be it migrants, be it anything. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to go through that. We don't need the paperwork. We don't need any of this. We just believe him. Does it take? And are you all scared that you might be branded a weakling for allowing the last shred of your human morality to take a front seat as opposed to the back seat, and questioning where is this list, the list that they were promoting? Trump's name is on it. Do you want to know? Are we so lost in our political partisanship that even if we find out, we would bury it because we feel our own personal responsibility? Like if we support somebody and they do a shitty thing, that is somehow the onus is on us because we supported them or we voted them in? That people worry about, they're looking at us? How could we? Because and what would be our answer? We didn't know? From Access Hollywood on up, and all the accusations that it was done against Trump during the first presidential administration, and now this Epstein stuff that is also decades old. Where did you find that compromising line in your trade-offs? Where was it in you where you found it that you could say, I know that's bad, but he may have done this, but sure, he might have just done that, but what is on the other side of that but? What is the thing that is going to prevent you from turning from this man? figure that out because I don't know what it is. So many things about this man, in this day and age in politics for that matter. 20 years ago? 30 years ago? Would have been game over for a politician. It would have been game over for a politician if they found out that he was having an affair. No rape, no drugs, no abuse, none of that. Just consensual sex by someone who was not their wives. That would end their political career. And now we're up to entertaining the idea that your president of the United States may have pedophily raped a little girl in the 90s and was defending or protecting the person that was passing in the party favor, whose administration is trying to bury a list that his name might be on. We're at that point, aren't we? Bullshit and weaklings. Your president calls you that. You're weak because your conscience was overtaking your fanatical loyalty. Don't believe your lying eyes. Only listen to your leader. It was written by Obama and Clinton and Comey. The list that didn't exist, but now it exists. But now it doesn't really exist. But now it exists, but it's a hoax. If you bob your head in agreement, I have a feeling that you don't really agree with it, but you just needed an excuse to go on supporting this man. As I said before, maybe you were concerned that people would accuse you of knowing this and still supporting him, and that this would be on you. I won't accuse you of it being on you. You didn't do these acts. If it's true, Donald Trump did these acts. What I will ask of you is that if this was proven true, and the election of 2024 was tomorrow, would you still vote for Donald Trump over a black lady that laughs? The ranter rants, because the urge to rant is always rising. See you next time.